He is not a murderer, the man before me. He did not stab a family of 4 to death in their own home. He did not calmly sit and watch them bleed on the floor before he left. And yet, I can't help but shiver when I look at him. He is not a murderer, and I know it. The evidence was weak. He was condemned by powerful men pulling strings. But seeing him now fills me with dread of what is to come. He is not a murderer, but I'm about to become one. My hand trembles as it approaches the lever. If you stand alone at the corner of Church Street and Market Street in Charleston, South Carolina at 3 a.m., you see a man coming down Church Street wearing a black hat and black cape with stringy white hair and weathered skin. He'll stop at one of the 2 corners directly across from where you are standing and start to walk the corner directly opposite from where he is standing. When he reaches about halfway, dead center of the intersection, and nobody else has arrived, he'll stop, turn, and look directly at you. If you do not blink for roughly 20 to 30 seconds, he'll tip his hat to you and walk along his way, disappearing into the dark shadows of the trees that line the streets. Nobody knows what happens if you follow him. If you do blink before he tips his hat, the very first thing you will see is the man standing directly in front of you. He'll grin maliciously at you and draw a blade hidden in the shaft of the cane and slash you across your throat. But you will not feel a thing. You will, however, pass out and remain in a comatose state until the sun rises over the horizon. For the next 6 nights, you will have a recurring dream of the man walking down the street, appearing suddenly before you and slashing your throat. On the 7th night, the events will replay the same up until he stops in the middle of the intersection. At this point, he'll say, "It's been fun playing with you, boy, but now it's time for you to go. Don't ever let me see you again." He'll then tip his hat and walk away before you wake up. Nobody knows what happens if you visit the corner a second time. If you ever are in an area of absolute quiet, still your breathing and move not a muscle. After a few seconds, you will notice that the silence has a sort of sound of its own, a kind of empty ringing tone. This is nothing unique. Everyone will hear this given the proper setting. And an informed person will tell you that your brain is trying to interpret the lack of stimuli to your hearing, and so creates a bit of a filler sound. Actually, there is never, ever total quiet anywhere on Earth. This sound actually covers something very important. For a persistent individual, one can discern what is under this pitch. The next time you're in such a situation, shout at the top of your lungs for about half a minute. Then become completely silent all at once. It will be different for everyone. Some will hear nothing different for dozens of tries. Others might catch a snatch of soft murmuring. A special few might clearly make out what they hear on the first attempt. What you will hear is a voice that relays an account of events about to happen in the immediate future. It's like a sportscaster relaying the events occurring 10 seconds later. Such an ability would doubtlessly be invaluable, no? You will be able to react to any immediate danger, relate to people around you with greater ease. No one would ever surprise you. As time goes on, you will be able to make out this voice under increasingly noisy circumstances, to the point that it can be heard at any time by just concentrating. Now, of course, you are wondering what sort of horrible catch there is for this. Airlock. When the game starts, you're alone in a bunker. You would cross off another day on the calendar and start to check your gear. You prepare to leave for the nearest town. You strap on your gas mask and pull up your hood. The green light on your oxygen gauge tells you that you'll be able to survive in the airless environment outside. The world was brought to a complete standstill when the air started dissipating. Most didn't know what was happening before it was too late. It wasn't how humanity had figured it would end. All in all, it was a very silent, quick affair, without the big explosions or the screaming masses fleeing. In fact, no one could have imagined a quieter apocalypse. People simply fell where they stood or sat at the time. There wasn't time to evacuate, and where would people have gone anyway? Those who survived were the people who had planned ahead, who had prepared for the impossible. Their reward was solitude on a lifeless, airless planet. But at least there's plenty of time to think and reflect. The end happened so quickly that the destruction was limited. You have entire cities open to exploration and treasure hunting. Only, you have to watch your air gauge. The air gauge itself is on your suit and clothes, not on your UI, so you have to look down to see it. If you forget it, you might end up fucked unless you can somehow find air. You move around empty schoolyards, apartment buildings, and skyscrapers. The lack of air preserved the billions of bodies worldwide relatively longer than they otherwise would have been. And now the empty planet is a mausoleum of dried up human husks, littering streets and buildings. You would have to scavenge for stuff to improve your gear so you could stay out longer. Through exploring, you might find other safe bunkers, and you'll be able to move around more freely. And then there would be the enemies. What would they be? Something that doesn't require air, which could stalk you and make you feel watched. A less open threat that might attack when you least suspect it. And would there be others? Maybe you would have to find them first. Would you even go armed? No air would mean no sound, so all you would have was the clicking of the glass mask, and maybe whatever contemporary band you managed to put up on that banged up scavenged iPod that you managed to find in the pocket of a body near the airport terminal. You would have to consider getting fuel for the generator in your safe house as well. Your only contact with other people would be some guy, or girl I guess, who you talk to frequently over what's left of the internet or some shit, or some old radio type thing. Like you've known him for years, never seen him. He's your only company in an otherwise dead world. And he's holed up somewhere else, exactly like you. One day, he stops signing in, or going on the air. And you decide to find out what happened to him. You only have a faint idea where his bunker is, and you know you wouldn't have enough air to get there in one stretch. And that's where the game really begins. Do you make an effort to find him, or find out what happened to him? Or do you just go on with your life, salvaging, exploring, and listening to your own breathing as you make your way through the still graveyard of humanity? In 2009, an amateur video artist studying in the UK uploaded a video onto YouTube and other sites of a recent piece that he did. After many reports and complaints, the video was removed from many sites. The piece allegedly begins with a shot of a foggy green field, some saying located in Ireland. Only sound that can be heard is a light hissing and some muffled speaking. The camera slowly starts zooming in on a white spot in the shot. After several tedious minutes, people describe a scene involving an albino deer. A close-up shot of her eyes suddenly appear to viewers, showing some sort of infection or sign of blindness. The following shot then shows the deer staring at a vanity mirror for about a minute. After this, things start to become stranger. The deer in the reflection starts moving in dissonance with the real one. Zooming in, the camera focuses on the deer in the reflection, showing it move about in a frightening manner. People have often described the movements as unnatural and physically grotesque, as though someone was molding her like a piece of clay. As these frightening movements continue, a shot of the real deer is shown again. This time, however, She's laying on the ground, strangely at peace. The shot goes on for approximately 2 minutes, still showing the grotesque gestures of the reflection, which is slowly starting to darken. The deer laying down then starts to excrete a black fluid from under her tail, suggesting a birth to occur. The tar-like substance continues to seep out from her onto the ground. At this point, many people stop to report the video. Some accounts vary, but many describe a scene where a stillborn human child comes out of the lying deer, covered in something like tar. Some have claimed it's some made-up hybrid between human and animal that the artist sewed together, or did in post-production. After a close-up of the hybrid's face is shown, the mirror is shown to be broken within an empty field. Black and white stock footage of a crowd applauding is shown in slow motion. And then, the film ends with about 5 minutes of blackness, and mumbles and murmurs slowly fading in volume. Many people say the video can no longer be found online, whilst others say that the audio goes around on file-sharing programs like SoulSeek and BitTorrent. Some even say that they have attained the video itself through such means. Screenshots of it unknowingly pop up on image boards and sites such as Tumblr, but the video itself has been hardly seen outside of its initial debut. A year later, the artist posted another YouTube video, but this time, it was just 5 minutes of a black screen and silence. However, the description contained a link to a webcam site. Viewers describe only seeing a couple of dangling, pale feet slowly rotating above a knocked-over chair. In Berlin, after World War II, money was short, supplies were tight, and it seemed like everyone was hungry. At that time, people were telling the tale of a young woman who saw a blind man picking his way through a crowd. The two started to talk. The man asked her for a favor. Could she deliver the letter to the address on the envelope? Well, it was on her way home, so she agreed. She started out to deliver the message when she turned around to see if there was anything else the blind man needed. But she spotted him hurrying through the crowd without his smoked glasses or a white cane. She went to the police, who raided the address on the envelope, where they found heaps of human flesh for sale. And what was in the envelope? This is the last one I am sending you today. A man, at about the age of 30, went to a hotel and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and all, and told him that on the way to his room, there was a door with no number that was locked and no one was allowed in there. So he went to his room and went to bed. The next night, he was curious as to what was in the room. So he walked down the hall to where it was and, of course, tried the handle. Sure enough, it was locked. So he bent down and looked through the keyhole. What he saw was a hotel bedroom, and in the corner was a woman whose skin was completely white. She was leaning up against the wall, and her head was facing the wall. He stared in confusion for a while, then went back to his room. The next day, he went back to the room and looked through the keyhole. This time, all he saw was redness. He couldn't make anything out besides a distinct red color, unmoving. At this point, he was confused and a little freaked out. He went to the front desk and asked the lady about the room. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" The man told her that he had, and the lady said, "Well, I might as well tell you the story. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in that room, and her ghost haunts it. But these people were not ordinary. They were white all over, except for their eyes, which are red." Most people who talk about near-death experiences are full of shit. They're usually religious phonies who use their car accidents and surgeries as an opportunity to shill for their preferred myths and superstitions. They talk about bright lights, a sense of calm, blah blah blah. None of it's true. Last year, I had a major heart attack. I spent 10 minutes legally dead before the doctors were able to finally restore my heartbeat. 10 minutes I spent staring directly into the eyes of God. You may ask me, quite reasonably, that if I know God exists, then why don't I go to church? Why don't I pray? And if you're feeling particularly macabre, why do I continue to take my heart medication to prolong my life when I know I'll meet God when I die? I can answer all of these questions all at once. If you saw the God that I saw, you would do anything not to see it again. The neighbor was a weird man. He was reclusive and never really spoke to anyone. Tom liked to scare me by saying he must be a murderer, that he always kept to himself so people wouldn't catch on. I didn't like the jokes and I would tell him off. The neighbor was probably just shy. Although I got mad at the jokes, I had to admit, the neighbor did make me uncomfortable. Tom worked a mix of day and night shifts. Tonight happened to be one of his night shifts. I don't like the idea of being home alone at night. Everything seems more sinister. But I tend to shake these feelings by watching some TV and going to bed. I was jolted awake by a loud noise. Maybe Tom had come home? I looked at my clock and saw it was 2:30 in the morning. Panic rose, my mind was racing, and I didn't know what to think. There was only two facts that kept repeating in my mind. Tom didn't finish work till 6, and that noise came from inside the house. I quickly looked out the second-story bedroom window to the driveway below, in case he did come back early. His car wasn't there, but what I saw made my blood run cold. It was my neighbor breaking into my house. I grabbed my phone and called the police. I waited in my room, too scared to go downstairs, and prayed the police would come in time. They did. They caught him. I was still in my bedroom, watching from my window as they took him to the car. He was struggling and screaming. He really was a madman. "You don't understand," he yelled. "I saw someone else go in the house." As my brain was processing his meaning, I heard my bedroom door shut behind me.